In this recording, I'd like to talk about a very important concept in Microsoft Word that I just don't think many people get a real good handle on. It's covered in Tutorial 2 of Beginning Word, and the topic is sections and section breaks. I'm going to be using my Unit 1 sample that I started in recording number 1. If you didn't follow recording number 1, you should be able to follow along with this one. You just won't have the word art that's at the top of my document, but that won't make a big difference. Section breaks allow you to break your document into obviously multiple sections, but what's the value of a section? The value of a section is that you are allowed to format each section in a different way using page formatting. We can obviously format paragraphs any which way we want by indenting them, by changing the margins. It's a paragraph level formatting. But what if you want to do page level formatting differently in different parts of your document, such as margins? I want to have one page with some margins and other pages with other margins, or even parts of a document with different margins. You can't do that without sections. One document, if it doesn't have sections, can only have one set of margins. If you change the margins on page 1, it automatically changes the margins all the way through the page 50, unless you have sections. You can change the orientation. We're going to do that in just a second. If I want to have one page it's portrait and one page it's landscape in the same document, I can do that using sections. If I want to change the paper size, I've got one normal page, one legal size. I haven't done that, but you can. If you're creating a newsletter and you want part of your document to have no columns, another part of your document to have 3 columns, another part of your document to have 2 columns, you can do that using sections, but you must use sections. So how do we insert sections? How do we create sections? There's 2 ways. Both of them come from the Page Layout tab under Breaks. There are 2 kinds of sections. There's a next page section break, and there's a continuous section break. There's a third one, even odd pages, that breaks on those kinds of things. I'm not going to worry about those, but these are the 2 most common. A next page section break, if you insert one of those, does 2 things. It creates a new page and puts that page in a brand new section, and then every page thereafter is considered part of that section. A continuous section break allows you to create a section in the middle of a page without having to start a brand new page, so you can create multiple sections. You'll do this in the homework assignment where you'll take part of a page and change its margins so that you can put clip art and text boxes and things in the margin. Nice idea, works very, very well. So that's a continuous section break. Let's start with a next page section break. I'm going to go to the end of my document, and if I wanted to create a brand new page now, I could just press Control Enter. That's the shortcut key for entering a page. But what that doesn't do is create a new section. This document doesn't have sections. I can tell because the status bar down here at the bottom doesn't tell me what section I'm in. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to use my page layout to insert a break instead. I'm going to use a next page section break. Now I have a new page down here at the bottom, and my status bar still is not showing me the section. So let's take a second of this recording and add the section to the status bar. I'm going to right click the status bar, and I want to show, notice that the section option is unchecked. I want to show that, and so now it tells me I'm in section 2. And I click back up at the top, I now see that I'm in section 1. If you're using sections, and I have lots of sections and lots of documents, I recommend you turn on the section option for your status bar. So you have to right click down here to do that and turn on the section option. All right, so here I am in section number 2, completely different section. I can do all these page formatting things to this section. I mentioned that we can do page margins, that we can do orientation. So let's change the orientation of this page. Normally, if you change the orientation of a document, it changes every single page. But because I'm in a different section, it changes the orientation of only this section. And so I'm going to zoom back out a little bit here so that we can see better. A little bit more. Waiting for them to go side by side, but they don't want to. But notice that page orientation is landscape, and this one is portrait. And by adding multiple sections, you can have as many sections in a document as you want. By adding multiple sections to your document, you can create one page that's portrait, then another one that's landscape, and then another 3 that are portrait, and then another 2 that are landscape, as much as you want. There's many different sections with as many different orientations as you want. Let's get my zoom down to about 120 here. think that's good enough. Now the margins here are 1 inch. The margins on my main page are 1 inch. So if I scroll here a little bit so I can see that text, I'm now going to change the margins in my second section to wide margins. So the left and right margins are going to go to 2 inches. But notice this text didn't change. It still has a 1 inch margin. Okay. But here I now have 2 inch margins on this page. So that's another example of what you can do within sections. Well, what if I want both sections to be that margin? Then you're going to have to do it to each one. Okay. Only when you do margins, orientation, sizes, those kind of things, it only applies to the current section that your cursor is in. Other things that you can do that we didn't talk about, we can add page borders. So we're going to do page borders. So let's go ahead and do that on a different ones for different sections, but this one's a little trickier. I'm going to go to the design, and here's my page borders tab. And let's say I want a graphical page border here. I'm going to do one of those things. They're kind of gross looking. See if I can find the one that I like. There, that looks good. It's kind of purplish. And it's going to go all the way around. But notice when I do that, this is going to be applied to the whole document. So if I click on OK, every page has that page border. It's not what I want. So I'm going to do that one more time. Page border with a graphic. Okay. And we can make it a little bit bigger if we want to, so it's easier to see. But instead of the whole document, I only want to apply it to this section. So we have the ability to apply page borders to each section differently, but you have to remember in this case to change it. And if it doesn't, you do what I did. You undo and do it again. Make sure you apply it to a section. And now that page border is only applied to the second page. Okay. So that's another thing we can do. And headers and footers, another very common use of page border or different sections. You can have different headers and different footers on each section. So if your document needs to change its headers and footers, you can do that. If you change the orientation, your headers and footers are typically the header has a piece of text that's aligned to the left and another piece of text that's aligned to the right. Okay. But you might not, when you orientate that differently, those tabs may not be in the right place. For some reason I'm not seeing them here. Let's go into the tab bar here. And here's the, that's not tabs, that's margins, excuse me. Let's just double click one of these. It's not tabs either, here's the tabs. And there's no tabs on this page. Doesn't look like there's any tabs, maybe on the first page either, I might have removed them. But normally there's a left, excuse me, and a center and a right tab. But if you change the margins, those tabs may not align right. So you might have to move those. So headers and footers and the tabs in the headers and footers are things that you can change in a different section. And finally, the other thing I could think of that you could change is vertical alignment up and down on a page. If you insert text, it normally occurs at the top of the page, but you can have your page centered vertically. That's done in the margins tab. So I'm going to double click on margins here. And here's my top margins, and under layout, here's vertical alignment center. If I change that, it'll only change the second page's vertical alignment, not the first page vertical alignment. Notice the apply to this section. Okay, so that's what you can do with them. Let's put another one in here. Let's try a continuous section break. If you want to insert columns, for instance, okay, you need to put in probably a continuous section break wherever you want those columns to start. I want my title to be across the top with no columns. I want this part of the document from here on down to change to show columns. So I'm going to go to page layout. Excuse me. Change the columns to 2. Okay. And now we can see the results. We've got 2 different columns. That didn't affect this page though. Notice it's a different section. So when you apply columns, it only applies to the current section. While we're at it, let's study columns a little bit and drop this down. There's some more options that we can do. Oops, cursor's in the wrong spot. Notice it only told me there were no columns. So I'm going to click inside here where I do have columns. This is how you modify column settings as well. Okay, and there are things I can change. I can change the number of columns here. What if I want 4? Then you use this to change it to 4. If I want a line in between, I'll take that. I can change the width of each column. Notice as I change the width, the spacing goes down because there isn't enough space between the margins to have a 3.2 inch width with some spacing in between, so I think I'll stick to 3.1. And again, I'm only applying it to this section. Click on OK, And now I've got that vertical bar that's going all the way up across the top of the page. Sometimes it takes a little finagling. Decided I don't like the vertical bar, so I'm going to turn it off. Again, click inside the section, columns, more columns. Wait a minute, I'm in section 1. I thought I inserted a continuous section break. I might have forgotten. So let's undo a couple times. Now I'm back. I need to insert my continuous, I think I forgot this part. Insert my continuous section break. Right? You don't see anything unless you turn on the markers, and the book recommends that your paragraph markers are always on. Me personally, they make me crazy. But notice when I inserted the section break, there is one here. You can select them. What I often do with these section breaks is select them and make sure that their formatting is normal so they don't take up any extra space. In the book, particularly where they have you place these section breaks, the text that you're applying the section break before is large text. So my advice in my instructor's notes is that you change this to normal, or again, clear all of its formatting and maybe any of its vertical spacing. There's no space here, but the ones in the book, you get extra spaces, and it wastes space. You have a big blank line there. Okay, so there is a section break. If you don't want it anymore, click on it, press delete, it goes away. But I do want it. And now I'm going to click down here, and notice I'm in section 2, down here at the bottom of my screen. And if I go down to the second page, I'm in section 3. So this is very handy to let you know which section you're in. It also caught my attention when I was doing my columns. So let's put the columns back in again, starting here in this section, page layout, columns 2. Already looks better. Okay. Let's see if it looks better if I stretch it again. So I'm going to go into the columns, more columns, put the dividing line in and make it a little bigger. Okay. And this time it looks better. My dividing line doesn't go all the way to the top because that divider line only is applied to this section. So that was another clue to me that something was a little goofy. Okay. One of the other things the book asks you to do, and this is also very important, is balance your columns. To balance columns, what you do, it's really simple, but it's something that most people don't know. The book points it out, and it's very handy. So you click at the end of your columns. If it's the third page, the fourth page of columns, doesn't matter. You go to the end, and then you insert another continuous section break, and it balances your column to a certain extent. Notice my columns are both about the same height. Okay? In this case, it didn't do a very good job. Because I have these titles embedded inside my text, I have photo opportunity here, and it's separated from its code. So maybe that section break wasn't such a good idea in this case. I'm going to turn my markers on and show you that it's there. It's hard to see, but it's there. I'm going to delete it. Okay. This section break is the next page section break, so you got to kind of keep your eye on these things. And now I know that I want the photo opportunity to start the second column. Another thing you can do with columns is click wherever you want and insert, kind of like a page break, but it's called a column break. Start a new column even though it's not time yet. Do the same thing, page layout, breaks, column break, and now photo opportunity is at the top of the second column. And we can see how the document looks here. We'll pull out a little bit, and it looks pretty good. Okay, so that's sections. Hopefully it gives you a little clarification. Sections are used to provide multiple sections in your document. Each one can have its own page formatting, margins, columns, headers, footers, vertical spacing, borders, those kinds of things. All those page formatting can be different in different sections.